Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The air was electric the moment I stepped into the room. My eyes found him instantly and a shiver ran down my spine. Not from cold but from the tension coiling between us. He was closer than I expected, his presence pulling at something deep inside me. I pressed against him, a slow, deliberate motion, feeling the weight of unspoken desires and careful restraint. Every subtle brush of skin, every lingering gaze was a conversation in itself, words we dared not say yet understood perfectly. My husband sat nearby, closer than comfort should allow, his eyes dark and intent. I could feel his hands, the quiet pressure, the way he mirrored my motions without a word. There was no rush, only the slow building of a fire we all knew we should resist but couldn't ignore. The room seemed to shrink, the world outside dissolving into a haze of tension, heat, and anticipation. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, syncing with the almost imperceptible rhythm of his movements. I wondered how we had arrived at this moment. Familiar faces, familiar voices, but a connection we had never allowed ourselves to explore. Something unspoken hung in the air, regret, curiosity, and the thrill of something forbidden. Every glance, every subtle touch teased at boundaries we weren't supposed to cross. Yet there was an undeniable magnetism that drew us together. A chemistry too potent to ignore. The energy between us was intoxicating. I could feel the pull of proximity, the way his gaze followed me, tracing my movements with quiet intensity. My husband's presence was both grounding and unnerving, his hands responding instinctively to mine, amplifying the tension. Time seemed to stretch, every second heavy with possibility. Each motion, no matter how subtle, carried a weight of meaning, an intimacy that lingered in the space between restraint and surrender. And then, as if the world had paused to witness this fragile equilibrium, we locked eyes, and the room became a stage for unspoken desires. I pressed closer, careful yet bold, and felt the quiet acknowledgement of everything left unsaid. The air was thick with anticipation, a promise of intensity that none of us could yet define. The moment was fleeting but infinite, leaving us all on the edge of something uncharted, something irresistible, something raw in its human complexity. The night hung poised between restraint and release, and in that silence we all knew the story had only just begun. Every glance, every breath, every subtle motion hinted at the tension to come. Nothing had been resolved, yet everything had shifted. The room held us captive, teetering on the precipice of desire and consequence, leaving only one certainty, that we could not walk away unchanged. The room seemed smaller now, the silence between us heavy with the weight of things unspoken. Every glance carried more than eyes could express. I could feel him watching me, the subtle pull of his attention wrapping around me like a warm thread. I shifted slightly, a mere brush of our shoulders, but it sent a jolt through me. Neither of us flinched, instead we lingered there, suspended in the quiet electricity of proximity. Words were unnecessary, yet they hovered unsaid, as if any syllable might break the fragile balance. My husband remained close, his gaze unwavering, and the tension doubled, layered with curiosity, longing, and the faintest touch of fear. Every movement seemed magnified, the way he leaned forward slightly, the way my hand brushed against his as I adjusted my position. Simple gestures became charged with meaning, like silent confessions we were too afraid to speak aloud. I caught his eyes again, and something flickered there, recognition, temptation, a spark of daring. I wanted to lean closer to bridge the space, but caution held me back. The thrill was in the restraint as much as the desire. Our hands hovered near each other, paused in midair like dancers frozen mid-step. The air was warm, dense with the anticipation of touch, of connection, of something we hadn't allowed ourselves to fully feel before. I noticed the way he exhaled slowly when I shifted closer, how his eyes softened just for a moment, betraying a longing he tried to contain. My heart beat faster, not just at the thought of him but at the complicated tangle of feelings this created. Desire and loyalty, curiosity and caution, they all clashed silently in the space between us. I realized that the tension wasn't just physical, it was emotional, layered with years of familiarity, trust, and uncharted territory. Time seemed to stretch as we remained there, inches apart yet worlds away in our thoughts. I laughed softly at something meaningless, and he responded, a quiet chuckle that made my chest tighten. The intimacy wasn't in actions but in awareness, the shared breaths, the glances, the mutual acknowledgement of an attraction we both knew we shouldn't indulge. Yet it lingered, undeniable and potent, like a secret pulse beneath the surface of everything. I leaned back slightly, testing the boundaries of my own restraint, and he mirrored the motion, matching me in silent rhythm. There was a poetry in our unspoken communication, a tension that spoke louder than any words could. It was frustrating, thrilling, and intoxicating all at once. I wanted to reach out, to close the gap, yet part of me hesitated, savoring the delicious torment of anticipation. The room held us in suspended time, a delicate balance of temptation and hesitation. Every glance, every subtle movement, every pause between breaths stoked the fire that neither of us dared to ignite fully. And yet, even in restraint, even in silence, the chemistry was undeniable. The night had only just begun, and the tension between us promised moments that would linger far beyond this room, far beyond these stolen charged seconds. The room felt smaller still, as if the walls themselves had drawn closer, sensing the unspoken tension that hung between us. My gaze met his again, and I could see the hesitation etched in the curve of his jaw, the way his lips pressed together as if holding back words or feelings that could change everything. I wanted to reach out, to close the gap, but a quiet voice inside warned me to wait. Part of me thrilled in that restraint, in the delicious torment of almost touching. Our fingers brushed ever so slightly as I adjusted my position, a fleeting contact that sent a shiver through both of us. I felt him tense just enough for me to know he felt it too. We both knew that one more movement could shatter the fragile boundary, yet neither of us pulled entirely away. It was a delicate dance, the closeness, the hesitation, the yearning all wrapped together in the tension between want and restraint. I glanced at my husband who sat near us, watching silently, unknowingly amplifying the weight of this moment. There were walls we had built around ourselves. Loyalty, past mistakes, fear of consequence, all acting like invisible hands, keeping us from stepping fully into what we wanted. I sensed his mind running parallel to mine, the conflict mirrored in his eyes, a longing, a curiosity, a hunger for a connection neither of us could voice aloud. The quiet hum of the room became our soundtrack. Every subtle shift, every soft breath was magnified in the charged air. I imagined leaning closer, feeling the warmth of his presence against my skin. But before I could, he shifted slightly back, a subtle retreat that made my heart ache. Not a rejection, far from it, but a recognition of how dangerous it was to cross that line. Desire hung thick between us, a palpable force that neither could ignore, and yet both feared giving in. I caught myself studying him, noticing little things I'd never really seen before. The way his eyes softened when they met mine, the tiny crease in his brow when he tried to remain composed, the subtle curve of his lips that promised unspoken words. It was intoxicating, yet it was complicated. Everything in the room told us to resist, yet every instinct in our bodies pulled us closer. And then for a brief heartbeat our faces nearly touched. I could feel the warmth of him so close that the world outside the room disappeared entirely. Our hands hovered, paused in the delicate space between curiosity and surrender. Then, slowly, almost reluctantly, we pulled back, not because the pull had gone but because it was too strong, too overwhelming, too raw to handle in that moment. Even in retreat the tension remained, a lingering ache that promised it was far from over. There was longing in every glance, unspoken words in every breath, and the certainty that this night had shifted something fundamental between us. We were caught in a delicate web of emotion, desire, restraint, curiosity, and fear, and no one was willing to untangle it yet. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when the invisible walls might crumble, when one small gesture could ignite the fire that both of us knew was inevitable. The room seemed to hold its breath as I sank a little closer, drawn by a force I could no longer name. Every movement felt magnified. The subtle rise and fall of his chest, the brush of his sleeve against mine, the almost imperceptible shift of his weight toward me. I could feel the electricity in the air, not in sparks or flashes but in the quiet, undeniable pull between us. Time slowed, each second stretching long enough to feel our shared heartbeat. He looked at me then, eyes wide, searching, and for a moment the space between us wasn't measured in inches but in unspoken confessions. There was something in his gaze that broke through the careful restraint we'd both been holding onto. Something raw, vulnerable, and achingly human. I wanted to lean in, to cross that invisible boundary, but part of me clung to hesitation, to the fragile thrill of almost touching. A soft laugh escaped him, nervous, almost shy, and it tumbled through the tension like a single note in a quiet symphony. I mirrored it, a soft smile tugging at my lips, and in that tiny instant the walls we'd built around ourselves wavered. I could feel the weight of everything unspoken, the secrets we both carried pressing between us. And yet the intensity didn't diminish, it grew. The desire wasn't physical, not in the conventional sense, it was emotional, profound, the hunger of two souls recognizing each other across the years of restraint and careful distance. My hand hovered near his, trembling slightly as if it might betray the torrent of emotion I tried to hold in check. His fingers twitched in response almost imperceptibly, and I felt a thrill that raced from my fingertips straight to my heart. We were suspended in a moment of fragile intimacy, a precipice where every glance, every breath, every pause carried the weight of a confession neither of us dared speak. Then he spoke, softly, almost a whisper, words that barely left his lips but landed like stones in the stillness of the room. I didn't need him to repeat them. The meaning was in his eyes, in the tilt of his head, in the trembling warmth of his presence. I responded not with words but with a breath, a shift closer that didn't quite close the gap, but made it feel as if the distance between us had vanished. The air was heavy with tension, thick with longing, and yet suspended by restraint. Every subtle motion felt electric. We didn't touch fully, but in the lingering glances, the barely there brush of skin, the shared exhale, it was as if the world outside had disappeared, leaving only this suspended moment, raw and poetic, charged with everything we'd both been holding back. The room was silent, yet the silence itself hummed with intensity, a kind of music composed of breath, heartbeat, and unspoken truth. And as I held his gaze, feeling the electric pull that neither of us could deny, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The threshold of intimacy had been crossed, even without a single word. We were perched on the edge of something extraordinary, something inevitable, something that promised a fire we could not yet name, and the anticipation was unbearable. The rain outside tapped gently against the windows, a soft percussion that mirrored the rhythm of our hearts. The room glowed with warm golden light, shadows curling across the walls like quiet spectators to the intimacy that had finally unfurled between us. Every sound, every breath felt magnified, the faint sighs, the rustle of fabric, the subtle shift of weight on the sofa. I leaned closer and our breaths met, soft and trembling. Her breath melted into his, carrying the unspoken confessions we'd both carried for too long. It wasn't about touch or movement, it was about presence, about the way our bodies seemed to recognize each other as if they had memorized the contours and hesitations of longing itself. Every glance became a language, every pause a sentence in the story we could never voice aloud. The warmth of him near me was intoxicating. I felt the gentle pressure of his hands, not guiding, not demanding, simply holding space for the fragile vulnerability between us. Our closeness was magnetic, a silent understanding that let us exist together in that moment without fear, without boundaries. The intensity wasn't in action but in the surrender, the quiet letting go of restraint, the acknowledgement of desire without crossing lines that might shatter the beauty of this connection. Outside, the rain streaked the glass in ribbons, softening the world beyond our cocoon. Inside, time seemed suspended, a delicate bubble of shared awareness. I could feel her heartbeat, quick and steady, sinking subtly with his, a silent duet of longing and relief. Their bodies spoke the words they couldn't say, communicating through warmth, through proximity, through the gentle curve of a shoulder leaning into the other. The glow of the lamps made his skin golden, the subtle shadows emphasizing the contours of closeness. Every detail was vivid, from the tilt of her head as she listened to him in silence, to the slight brush of fingertips that left sparks in their wake. Nothing needed naming, the room itself held the story of this night of surrender, of trust, of desire, transformed into something tender and breathtaking. I closed my eyes for a heartbeat, letting the moment wash over me. The quiet intimacy was sharper than words, richer than any declaration. It was the simple, breathtaking elegance of finally letting go, of letting ourselves exist wholly in this connection, in this night, in the soft warmth that bridged the space between our longing hearts. Even in restraint, the moment was complete. Even without a single overt gesture, we had touched something deeper, a spark of truth, a spark of understanding, a spark of raw human connection. And in that silence, with rain drumming softly, the room alive with quiet electricity, I realized that we had reached the pinnacle of our journey together. Not with words, not with actions, but with presence, with letting ourselves be entirely beautifully seen. The tension had transformed into a luminous intimacy, a suspended moment that would linger long after the night ended. Morning light filtered through the blinds, soft and uneven, painting stripes across the room like silent witnesses to the night before. The air was heavy with quiet, a mixture of warmth and lingering tension that neither of us dared to break. No words were spoken at first. The only sounds were the gentle creaks of the floorboards and the faint hum of the city beyond the windows. I sat on the edge of the sofa, tracing the fabric with my fingertips, lost in thought. He leaned back slightly, watching me with an intensity that had softened overnight into something quieter, something reflective. The passion of the night had transformed into a fragile vulnerability, and suddenly every movement, every glance felt like navigating uncharted territory. There was a heaviness in the air, not from regret, exactly, but from the weight of emotions finally acknowledged. My husband sat nearby, silent, his presence both grounding and complicated. There were no accusatory looks, no words of judgment, only a shared awareness that things had shifted irreversibly. It was messy the way our hearts raced, the way glances lingered too long, the way we were all conscious of the invisible threads binding us together. Was it love? Was it curiosity? Was it the thrill of surrender? Perhaps it was all of these tangled up in a knot that we didn't yet know how to untangle. A soft laugh escaped me, tentative, and he mirrored it, a faint echo of the intimacy we had shared. In that moment the air felt lighter, not entirely free of tension but softened by acknowledgement. The connection between us had deepened, rooted not just in desire but in the courage to feel, to lean into the vulnerability we had hidden for so long. Every glance, every shared breath, was a conversation without words, a testament to the trust and the chaos of what we had discovered in each other. Then, a knock at the door interrupted the fragile peace. My heart jumped, and his eyes met mine, wide with curiosity and apprehension. Neither of us moved immediately, caught between caution and the magnetism that had guided us all night. The knock came again, softer this time, and with it arrived a surprise visitor, someone neither of us expected, someone whose presence promised to reveal truths we hadn't dared face. We froze, suspended between anticipation and uncertainty. The room felt smaller now, the morning light highlighting the tension and warmth in equal measure. And yet beneath the shock there was a quiet thrill, a sense that the night had changed everything, that the connection we had shared was no longer something we could hide or ignore. It had become real, messy, and human, and that reality was both terrifying and exhilarating. As the door creaked open I realized that nothing would ever feel the same again. The threads between us had been woven tighter, stronger, and the challenge now was not to resist but to navigate the new world we had created in the space of one night. Hearts full, eyes wide, we faced the morning uncertain, trembling, and yet entirely alive to the possibilities that lay ahead. The afternoon sun poured softly through the curtains, warm and forgiving, as if the room itself had exhaled after the storm of the night before. The air was calm now, heavy with quiet satisfaction and the delicate hum of hearts slowly finding their rhythm again. We sat together on the sofa, not speaking, letting the silence hold all the things words could never fully capture. He leaned back and I felt the weight of everything shared in the night settle between us. His hand brushed against mine lightly, deliberately, a simple touch that carried the entire language of trust, surrender, and acknowledgement. I rested my head against his shoulder, the soft rise and fall of his breath matching mine, and in that moment the world outside ceased to exist. Time had slowed, leaving only warmth, closeness, and the unspoken understanding that some things were worth keeping, some moments worth cherishing. Our hearts had chosen their own rhythm, a slow, deliberate cadence that refused to be rushed. The fire of desire had cooled into something richer, something deeper, the kind of intimacy that survives beyond passion, beyond fleeting need. I felt it in the tilt of his head as he rested his forehead against mine, in the gentle squeeze of his hand, in the way his eyes softened whenever they met mine. It was a quiet kind of magic, the kind that made the ordinary extraordinary. We didn't speak of what the night had meant. It was unnecessary. The memories lingered like the faintest perfume, impossible to ignore, impossible to forget, but now comforting rather than confining. Each glance, each shared breath, each gentle touch was a reminder that connection was more than physical. It was about trust, about vulnerability, about letting someone see every corner of you and still choosing to stay. The room hummed with contentment. I could feel it in the way his shoulder relaxed under my head, in the soft exhale we shared, in the quiet heartbeat of a love and longing that had been tested, stretched, and ultimately made whole. Whether this was forever or just a fleeting chapter, it was perfect in its imperfection, honest in its tenderness, and luminous in its intimacy. As I closed my eyes I felt the echo of the night still pulsing gently beneath the surface, a reminder of everything that had shifted, everything that had been discovered, and everything we had chosen to hold close. The fire had not needed words nor deeds to be felt. It had been present in every glance, every breath, every heartbeat. And in that silence, that shared warmth, we found our peace, fragile, tender, and infinitely human.